Hey, welcome everybody. We'll give everyone just a few minutes to trickle in, and then we will get started. Hopefully you can see my screen that I'm sharing live Q&A on best practices for batch manufacturing. Um, yeah, and we'll get rolling. Nate, Alex, thanks for joining me. It's great to see you guys.
Always a pleasure.
Good to see you too.
So, everyone, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. We're really happy you could make it. My name's Peter Suttard. I'll be your host. And I'm a little disappointed. My camera is a little further away than Nate and Alex, and I look much smaller than both of them combined. Uh, so CAI has brought us together, and we're going to be talking about your questions, essentially around audits and how to handle them. Before we dive in, we have a few different quick housekeeping notes. We'll record the session, so if you miss something, no problem. We've got our slide deck and a recording that we can share. Use your Q&A box. You can drop in questions anytime, and the team will collect them and send them my way, and we can get Nate and Alex talking on them. And then use your chat, say hello, let us know where you're joining in from. It's great to see who's in the room. With that, let's get started. We got Alex, founder of Markov, and Nate, CEO at Qualitas, answering everything and anything on your mind about quality audits today. Maybe Nate, Alex, do you guys want to give a brief introduction and we'll get into it?
Sure. I can go first. As Peter said, I'm Nate Call, the CEO of Qualitas. We are a quality and compliance consulting firm, primarily focused on dietary supplements, food and beverage, beauty. I always make we are the lotions and potions consulting firm joke. And we work with a lot of brands and manufacturers in all of those categories. Our team has done hundreds, if not 1,000+ audits over the last few years, and are intimately familiar with the pain and suffering that can happen on a production floor relative to auditing. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you both today.
Alex, you're up.
And this sounds good. I'm Alex. Sorry, got a bit of a frog in my throat today, so I'm going to work my way through that. But I'm founder of Markov, and we provide systems for manufacturers to do everything that's needed to be tracked in a manufacturing facility, but with a key focus on quality data and audit prep.
Love it. Okay, sounds good. Let's dive in. That's the extent of the slide deck we promised. Let me try to de-share it, and then we will get to it. So, first question. How have you seen audit experiences or like the expectations from the FDA and other auditing groups change recently, especially with more and more digital traceability, kind of those kind of requirements? Nate, we'll start with you.
I would say the biggest change that I see, and something we share often with our clients, is you have to have readily accessible data and documentation. And now that we are in such a digital AI-driven age, there's really no excuse when you are in an audit to say, oh, I can't find that, or I need to go over here and grab this piece of paper buried inside of a filing cabinet. The expectation now is you can very snappily just deliver everything to the auditor. It should be far more accessible than it was even 5 years ago. And I would say it's the elimination of excuses with respect to data has been a pretty major shift inside the audit room from my perspective.
Fantastic. Alex?
Yeah, I mean, what I've seen is that quality and safety expectations from the public are just always rising. Compared to 20 years ago when I started doing this to now, you know, uh, what I saw then in pharma and cosmetics and then dietary supplements is just moving into food, and expectations everywhere are getting higher and higher. So, enforcement might not always be there with public expectations from the government side, but from industry, it's just always going up.
It is in food. We talk about it like a monolith, but it's been interesting to watch it slowly, kind of these cosmetic style traceability requirements slowly filter way through food, right? Milk has just kind of happened where we see more dairy stuff, but it hasn't been, it's not a monolith on the food side. I thought that's been interesting.
Yeah. Each of those food industries is kind of its own little micro vertical, but a lot of commonalities too.
Great. Okay, a common question, Nate, that we saw a lot of: why are audits so stressful? I think people have a good sense of why they're stressful, but even for prepared companies, what are the kind of things that they're getting caught on?
I think the biggest issue and kind of situation a lot of companies find themselves in, even the most buttoned up, are situations where they are caught not following their written procedure. That is always the most low-hanging fruit for any auditor, where what you may be doing in practice could actually be better than what your SOP, your procedure says, but letter of the law says we do have to follow our written procedures. If we deviate from that procedure, we have to go through the deviation and approval process. That is always the biggest issue in an audit. And we work with a lot of companies that have very robust, very well-managed quality systems, but I think an experienced auditor can sniff out where they know you are going to have an issue. And some of those common areas are complaints management or specification control and batch manufacturing records and things like that, where those are the most error prone areas in the quality system, at least in a manufacturer from my perspective. So when I audit, that's where I'm going to go, and that's where I'm going to catch you for sure.
Yeah.
Alex.
I mean, obviously agree with Nate. Maybe a different lens on that is some of the details, right? Where a particular document could be missing. And I guess what I've seen is that if your processes are paper and Excel driven, fundamentally humans are the glue that hold together your process, which means that like people are fallible and something could be missed. So it means like
Sure.
even if you have good processes and you've got good training, you never know if they pick a lot number. You've got thousands of them. You haven't looked at that one. Are you sure that that's not the one where somebody missed something? That's kind of one of the nice things about electronic systems, right? You scan a barcode, it can't fail to record the lot number, and it won't move on
Yeah.
without you recording it. So I think that's why, a big reason why it's more relaxing is that you're not, you know, knowing, oh, here are a handful of lot numbers that I specifically know work. And I'm generally safe, but like hopefully the auditor
Yeah.
will pick one of these where I've actually validated it in advance, right?
Yeah, we have seen that where they have conspicuously located on a shelf the desired lot for audit. I was like, oh, let's pick something. Why let's grab this one right here.
Yeah. The old
Uh
card trick, right? Pick any card.
yeah,
Just
whatever card.
take this one. Yeah.
But yeah, this particular lot, please.
Yeah.
So Nate, people still do audits and survive pencil paper. What does it look like kind of on the pencil paper side? And then we'll get Alex to chime in on the electronic side.
I think on the paper-based system side, one of the biggest problems, and this is where I think a lot of quality teams experience stress, is it's exactly what Alex had mentioned. You don't have to, but everyone does it. You curate that perfect set of documentation for the auditor that you've spent, until 10 p.m. or midnight the night before scrubbing and making sure everything was perfect. You deliver that. And, to Alex's point as well, it's a human error prone environment where
Yeah.
all it takes is one person to not realize that two pages are stuck together in a set of documents and flip from page 1 to page 3, and then boom, you're in a jam with your auditor and you can't really talk your way out of it. Now they have to go down the rabbit hole of how are you going to prevent this in the future, blah 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 blah, and it just derails what should be a successful and productive conversation. It's you make yourself look like you do not have control of the system. And that is what you really want the auditor to feel through your communication and the evidence you provide in that audit room is, I, the head of quality, have this under control. Once they start digging into documentation that contradicts statements you make or contradicts your procedures, they have the sense that the system is out of control. And that's where the whole thing kind of unravels. The auditor is not as nice to you. And they start saying, well, you screwed up here. So odds are these other 5 areas are going to have gaps. So let's look at training. Let's look at corrective actions. Let's look at the
Right.
other things we know most sites struggle with. And we are going to find where you are struggling because you're struggling here, which means you're going to have gaps in other areas as well.
Got it. And then I think we've hit, obviously, an electronic system. It's easier, but it doesn't take care of everything. Alex, maybe I'll ask you a slightly different question. As people are putting in systems like this, what are things that they're missing? What are things that they should be doing that they still have to focus on, and they still have to make sure, so that the audit goes really, really smoothly?
Yeah, I mean, the system, it's not your process, right? So the system is like a really strong, effective set of guide rails. So you can't forget, right? It walks you through step by step. You can't forget to scan each ingredient. It's going to connect to the scale, so you're not going to screw up and not wait till the scale's stable. So it's very good at enforcing the rules you define, but you still need to have the right expertise to identify what are the control points you need, what is the data that matters. The system can't make those choices for you. That's where, you still need someone like Nate, not like me, to help you know what data should be collected and how to analyze it. We're just the weapon of choice for effectively executing that reliably.
Fantastic. Yeah, you guys are a great team, both on webinars and in execution on the manufacturing floor.
We do our best. We've had some reps together, Alex and I.
We have.
Okay, so this is some people have asked this. The best way to manage documentation when you're dealing with multiple lots of raw material or multiple batches of raw material. Are there best practices around that? Some specifics into this.
I think from my perspective, the main consideration is lot control, right? Make sure that you are not just referencing this material with a part number or with a SKU. We need to call out the specific lot that we are going to use in the manufacturing process. We should be following FIFO, first in, first out, or FIFO, first expired, first out. And that's really where the management of inventory becomes critical, where the beauty of a platform like this is the system is going to tell me what I need to be pulling based on the rules that I set up during the implementation process, right? If I click that FIFO button, I'm going to pull the material that expires first. If I click FIFO button, I'm going to pull the first material received into the production order. And that's where a lot of people screw up. I have I've had the experience that without a strong process, regardless of whatever electronic system you have, your team is going to pull whatever is most convenient for them. So it will be the first accessible, first out, or something to that effect. And it's very important that the process, the training, and the systems, they all work together to make sure that we are following a process that gives us traceability. And that's really the intent behind lot control at the end of the day, right? If you have an issue with a specific raw material, I want to know what it turned into, where those things went, how I can pull them back if we have to recall. And just managing that process and that attitude within the team is crucial to a successful quality system.
Fantastic. Alex, what's anything to add?
I mean, yeah, I have an answer, but first, just to add on to what Nate said, you have to have that quality process, rather to say that quality culture. Something horrific that I've witnessed more than once is that situation. They configure the system, management sits there, the quality team sits there, like, we want FIFO, have the system enforce it, and then the operator tries to scan a lot number. It's not FIFO. It says, you can't use this. Here's the lot you need. Go get it. And they say, man, that's hard to get to. There's a pallet in front of it. And then they go and scan it and use the lot number they want to anyways. So now they've not only not used FIFO, but they've broken their traceability chain, right? So, people, if without the quality culture, people will find a way to cheat. So, you definitely need that layer is essential. I hate that story, but it's very true.
Yeah.
I guess also to say that you were asking about multiple batch records and multiple lot numbers and the complexity of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the more the complexity is, like the longer your list of ingredients and the more products you make and the more batches you do, just the more the electronic system shines, right? Because without it, you're under this constant friction of people writing stuff with a pen and pencil and having to review it, and the volume becomes overwhelming. So the more data there is to capture, the more the separation between paper and computer grows. Um, but I would also say there's a kind of a key pitfall that's probably the right thing to bring up here, which is you sometimes see people buy a system and it tracks all the quality steps and it does everything, but they're so used to the paper that they want to capture the data on paper, put it in a stack, and send it to the office for somebody to enter later. And that is just like terrible, right? That it kind of completely misses the main benefits, which is like saving time and like catching the error when it happens rather than later. So, I would just shake that out of your mind if you're thinking that electronic systems for quality are a place to enter the data after the fact. The best way to do it is to put the data collection there on the shop floor in the hands of the actual operators and the quality people.
Can you expand on that? Because I run into that frequently in my conversations. So like, yeah, paper and we'll get it in later, and the audit's easy. And in that case, I mean, they are correct. The audit goes a little bit easier because it's all searchable. Why is doing it
Yeah.
live on the floor that much better?
Oh man. Um, you know, so quality practices, right, are supposed to do two things. Like, yes, you can pass an audit, but more importantly, they help you make high quality products. And by not putting it on the floor, you don't let the electronic system do everything it could, right? And so the easiest example is preventing errors before they happen. So do you want to actually
Sure.
have an error message show up that says that's baking soda, not baking powder, or it's expired, or it's not FIFO? Or do you want to like discover that when you enter the data and now have a failed batch, right? Like, it's just so much better there on the shop floor. And then also the time savings, right? Somebody wrote it down and somebody has to enter it later. It will like something that I'm sure we'll talk about later is about what quality people can do, you know, as the next layer, like as they level up with this. But,
Right.
I think it should be an objective to save time of the quality people. And if they're still punching data in, it's
Yeah.
not optimal.
Well, I think to expound on that further, one of the conversations we often have with our clients is you cannot solve problems in real time if you are not capturing data in real time, right? So in the example of I'm going to write everything down on this, form that I'm comfortable and familiar with, hand it to so and so in the front office, they'll do everything later. That is where the baking soda versus baking powder issues are caught. But now we are beyond an irreversible stage in the manufacturing process where you can't mix in, 100 kilos of baking soda when you needed baking powder in 1,000 kilo batch and say, oh shoot, let me get my baking soda magnet or whatever and zap this out. That does not happen. You scrap everything. So I think with quality people, and this is more of an issue with the old guard who was doing this on paper for decades before systems like Markov even existed. They're comfortable with paper. That is the only way they know. They are resistant to technology advancement and change because they don't understand it. And so I've worked at companies, multi-billion-dollar companies, who have deployed very expensive ERP systems. And we spend millions of dollars on training, millions of dollars on implementation. And then, rewind my career 15 years ago, I'm that sucker in the office at 7 p.m. keying in information from a batch record, only to find, oh shoot, this is not the right material. I used, material A1 instead of material A2, and no one caught it until I get to sound the 5 alarm fire, call everyone at 7 p.m. and everyone's mad at me when I'm not the one who
Right.
did it in the first place, right? I'm the
Yeah.
messenger and I caught the error. And I think an appetite for change has to be there. in the quality leadership team who should be a participant in the decision-making process and the selection process for an ERP, right? No one likes a system thrust upon them, and the best way to eliminate that is bring the right people into that decision-making process.
It's a good segue. I'll pause just for a moment. We've already got a few questions in. We will get to them, and if you have more questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A thing. How do you guys ensure then, so you have these audit findings, right? You found these mistakes. How does that lead to, a real process change? The way the question's written is a real process change versus another checklist, but sometimes checklists are a sufficient process change. How do you take these, like, what you've learned from audits and kind of where the recall didn't work, and get everybody kind of cleaner and better and faster for the next time?
I think the easy answer for me, and this is not a comfortable conversation I have with our clients, is some pushback we get when it comes to you need to move off paper, we need to go electronic, eliminate
Sure.
the human fallibility component there, is no, that won't work for us because we are unique in X, Y, or Z way. And then I have to say, from a regulatory and certification perspective, you are selling a widget. Just like your neighbor is selling a widget, there is nothing unique about your widget manufacturing. You may have a unique founder story or something like that. That's great. Everyone feels good, but that does not materially affect what happens on your production floor. You are mixing things together, putting them in a different thing, and selling that thing to someone in the public. So I think that's a conversation that has to happen, and those are not always easy conversations, as you can
Sure.
imagine. But what we want to avoid is a situation where we have the quality team married or just so heavily invested in a certain process that they say, oh no, it was the operator's fault, so we're just going to retrain them. My response to that is, well, you had already trained them and your process failed. Maybe we should look at the process, not Jim Bob here who makes, $20 an hour in your batching room. He has no control over what he's doing at the end of the day. That the process you fed him is the process he uses. To retrain someone on a broken process just further anchors that broken process into their mind. You have to attack the root cause, which 99% of the time is a process failure, not a person failure.
Great. Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from a system perspective, having a system that actually walks you through your processes, be they the batch processes or quality processes, does help make real change because, when you're on paper, people tend more to rely on their memory and their training. Whereas, if you atomize things into steps, if you list, here are the test results that we require, and you must enter them and they have to be in this range, it really reduces the opportunity for non-compliance unless there's like a willful lack of quality culture. And,
Right.
it does make it easy on people to take those changes, just because it requires less effort on their part. I would say, beyond audit findings, maybe, but other kinds of quality improvements, system does make it a lot easier to do root cause analysis. So it can be simpler to find a root cause of a problem because you just can more easily access all of that data. It can be
Sure.
also easier to show what the dollar value of solving the problem is. And it can be
Right.
easier also to prove you solved the problem after. And then also quality people have more time to actually do stuff other than stay up all night typing stuff in. So,
Yeah.
those are all probably helpful, but it all starts with that analysis and finding the root cause, which, as Nate said, is usually the process. And that's where it kind of the center point of it.
Yeah, kind of a pre-answer to this audience question. So maybe we'll get to that now. And Alex, this might be a good place for you to start. And then Nate, you'll have a lot of valuable experience on this one as well. There's this tension on the floor between quality, like, hold on, we got to do these checks. slow it down, and production needs to go faster, right? If we can get two more turns out, if we can do two more batches today, that's a bunch of revenue. If we can deliver that much sooner, this is a happier customer. And these two departments people find frequently in tension. So the question is, production teams pushing for speed and volume. How does quality get their voice in that conversation? And then how do we stay audit ready and everything without being a bottleneck?
Yeah. I mean, the first piece of the answer Nate already kind of touched on, which is that it is so much easier to prevent a problem with some pre-work and some enforcement in advance, rather than to have the problem and then get an argument about whether or not it's okay to just keep going, or whether you should
Right.
bear the cost of stopping, right? It's way cheaper to say you can't use baking powder, use baking soda, than it is to throw away the batch and start again, right? You don't want to be in that second conversation. So it is, something quality team can do to definitely try to move the enforcement to prevention rather than catching the problem later. But it's also what I was just saying about analyzing the cost of not fixing a problem versus the benefit of fixing it. That is a lot easier. You can turn to things like, look, um, you know, if we make this process improvement, maybe it's buying a more expensive version of raw material that has narrower quality specs. You can say, look, we'll do, on average only 2 turns, with adjustments before it's done instead of 4. And now we don't need to buy that new, $200,000 blender, right? We're going to save you money. That kind of stuff just gets way, way easier with systems as well.
Cool, Nate.
Boy, do I have a lot to say. I think that from a more philosophical perspective, I suppose, it makes sense to have some degree of friction between quality and operations at the end of the day, because we, the quality team, are trying, or should be trying, to help operations move as fast as possible without drifting outside of whatever risk or error tolerance we have. But what actually happens on the production floor is the quality team can be so overwhelmed by just volume of paperwork hitting them. They are flustered because they have a stack this deep of paperwork that they have to sign. Well, there is active production happening all around them, and they have to go do their in-process checks and their AQLs and go do all these things. Where quality people need to change their mindset is, it's not heroic to stop production. You are not going to ever get a high five from me because you shut down a production line. You're going to get a high five from me when you don't have to shut down a production line because you did your job well. There is nothing good about stopping production. I mean, of course, if there's an issue, if there's a jagged piece of metal going into product, of course, stop production. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but the real focus of the quality team should be the speed of operations, and you cannot focus on the speed of operations without understanding the risk tolerance of the business. And where people really get this wrong is they think it's their risk tolerance that the business needs to comply with in some form or fashion. And I will die on the hill of, your risk tolerance is irrelevant unless you are the CEO of this business. It is the executive teams and the owner's risk tolerance that the quality team needs to align with, which then needs to align with the goals of operations. So the quality team should really be an accelerant to operations, not, the roadblock team saying, oh no, I need you to wait 20 minutes while I review this paperwork and do this thing. We should be so far out of their way. The only time they see us is when we slap a green sticker on a pallet and say it's released, right? We should be a
Yeah.
ghost on the production floor, and we get in the way more often than we need to.
So again, just to restate it, the quality team really is a role to inform leadership of, listen, tell us what you're comfortable with. Here's the consequence of getting your different, because they'll say, yeah, perfect tolerance every time. And you're like, there's a cost to that, and here's that cost. Here's what you can do, pick from the menu, and we'll make sure it gets done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as long as we are not letting anything out the door that would lead to a consumer health or safety event,
Sure.
my perspective, your risk tolerance does not matter. I have been doing this for 15 plus years, and I'll spot a crooked label from 100 feet away on a grocery store shelf. That does not mean the people who made that product should shut down their production line because there's someone like me saying, your label's off by
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
1.25 millimeters, right? Is it going to harm a consumer? Is it going to harm the brand? If the answer to both of those questions is no, let it go.
Got it.
There's no reason to throw a fit when you don't need to.
Love it. And okay, Alex, this is a question for you from the audience. I'm pretty sure a question for you. They're saying for a recall exercise, what's the first report you should run to find the products and lots in Markov?
Right. So we have two reports in Markov for this. There's what we call the trace child and the trace parent. And basically, the kind of the vocabulary we use is we think of a raw material as the parent of the product that is made with it. And that goes through the generations, which are each layers in the production, right? So if you make an intermediate that you then use in a batch that you then use in a finished product production order, then you have 3 generations. So you start with the raw material, you go to the trace child report, and it will show you that kind of family tree, starting with the raw material to each layer, expanding out from there. And then finally, at the end, the last generation, if you like, are the shipments to the customers who got the finished goods and what their contact information is and the quantities you sent to them. That's number one. And we have the same report flipped for the trace parents, where you start with the finished good or wherever you want in the chain, and it goes upstream. Now, those reports are awesome. It builds the hierarchy and makes those lists of all the lot numbers impacted. But you can also click there to bring up a C of A for a raw number, or bring up a batch record for a product, or test records. So it's a really good jumping off point for all the records an auditor would want to see, or if it's just an internal quality issue you want to investigate.
Love it. Nate, less of a question for you. We'll get you, and yeah, feel free, everybody, if you have other questions, post them in the Q&A. I've got kind of 2 wrap-up questions. Looking forward, what do you see? This is kind of a tough one, crystal ball style, but Nate, from a regulatory push, what do you see changing in the industry that manufacturers can start preparing for?
The adoption of AI to review and interpret data is a risk to most manufacturing companies, and in fairness, a risk to brands. And what I mean by that is, with the FDA especially, and I talk about this all the time, they are a dinosaur, but that dinosaur is starting to figure out that there are tools that are far less expensive than hiring 100 people that will accomplish the same task of identifying in-market nonconformances, identifying which manufacturers, based on region, based on product type, based on all these other risk factors, are going to or should be at the top of our inspection list. So it's less of a, let's throw a dart and we're going to go visit wherever, or visit the manufacturer where that dart lands. It's a very risk-based, data-driven approach, which it always has been. But it's a lot more real now. And so I think the risk of inspection is a lot higher than it ever has been. And with that heightened inspection risk will come more frequent inspections. And so I think the days of, we'd be lucky to see the FDA ever, or once every 10 years are pretty long gone. If you're in a high risk product category, you're making something for an immunocompromised population, especially children or elderly people, you should expect to see the FDA far more often than you ever have before. And I think, not to get political at all, but the FDA is under a lot of pressure from the public right now. And with that pressure, the gloves have come off FDA inspectors and investigators on the production floor. So we are seeing far less agreeableness from regulatory inspections, regulatory investigators. Now it's, no, we have to prove the FDA is worth something. And so we are not going to give you an inch at all. It's a lot more black and white than it ever has been. And that is why I think you really have to make sure your data tells the right story in that audit room. You can't really razzle dazzle or charisma your way out of finding. It's, you know, there's truly no excuse now with technology. You have to do the right thing and you have to prove it.
Alex, what you chime in? What do you see changing on the manufacturing floor?
You know, so first of all, in terms of like, how do you be ready for whatever changes? I mean, it might sound like a truism on the technology side, but being flexible and ready for change is super important. I mean, it's important when we onboard customers that they be ready for change, but even within the context of the system, you know, you would never say, look, here is how we test our raw materials and here is how we will always do so. And it's now, you know, I think being ready to modify your processes and have your process built in a kind of a loop that allows for improvement and change is just, you know, it's just super important because things are moving fast. So to be ready and watching, you know, I don't have a crystal ball for what's coming next. On the
That's a
audit
good
side.
guess. I think it's a good guess. I'm on board.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. That is it.
Actually, Peter, what one thing I will say, this is not
Keep
so
going.
much on the audit side. This is one that that I do think about, which is more on the customer, the end user kind of expectation side, which is transparency. You know, people keep on calling for transparency. I think that for companies that have systems like Markov, there's a real opportunity coming in the next few years to be able to say, look, find the lot number on your box, take a look at the batch records, take a look at the test records. We don't care.
Yeah.
We have nothing to hide, right? Like the technology is kind of ready for that. And I'm a little surprised there aren't more companies trying to use that as a differentiator. I know there are some in dietary supplements that will let you scan and, you know, go and get a third-party testing panel, but I don't see that nearly as much as I expect to in the future.
Totally. Any last thoughts before we go? Yeah, Nate, anything else you wanna throw in? Anything you wish I asked that I didn't?
You did great, Peter.
Thank you.
No, I think, you know, in the beginning of the conversation, you know, we talked about how audits can trigger anxiety in a lot of quality people. And I think some degree of anxiety is important to have, and it's important to feel because it shows and really demonstrates that you actually care about what you are doing and why you care, maybe for reasons some don't agree with. It may be, oh, I really need this job versus I want to make sure the customer is protected. Both of those things are fine. But I often tell people, especially younger quality managers who are new to this space, preparation is the best anxiety medication, and no amount of staying up until 2 o'clock in the morning reviewing paperwork is going to make you less anxious. It is going to make you more anxious to have to do that. So everything you do on a daily basis is what will set you up for success in an audit. We do not want to live in a world where we are audit ready for 2 weeks before the audit, and then the other 50 weeks of the year, we are just fighting for our lives. We want to be ready all the time. It's easy to say audit ready all the time. We preach that to our clients, but one of the best ways to do that is following your procedures, using technology like Markov to make your life easier. So instead of spending so much time and energy and resources filling out paperwork, transcribing documentation, keying things in, anytime you spend doing that is time you are not going to spend controlling or assuring quality. The quality function is not a paperwork function. I mean, it is to some extent, but it is a documentation function, and that documentation now should be electronic. There is no reason why anybody should have a stack of paperwork that they have to fill out at the end of the day. It is silly to do that. And I think especially the manufacturers who do not lean into technology will be left in the dust, because if you can go faster, you can make more money, right? And if you are going slow because of paperwork, you are going to be left behind and you are going to be replaced by a 26-year-old with $1 million who started a manufacturing company that just annihilated your revenue that you have worked for 40 years to build, right?
So
It's those youngsters who are going to come in with the technology that will truly run circles around you. We've seen it happen. We've seen legacy manufacturers simply become irrelevant because there is a new player in town with better technology, which leads to better service, which leads to better pricing, which leads to a happier customer. So why would they work with this legacy manufacturer?
Alex, you're up.
No, I mean, I think Nate summed it up well, and yeah, just enjoyed the conversation.
Okay, fantastic. Everybody, thank you for joining us. If you would like to talk more, you're welcome to reach out to myself or Nate on Qualitas. It's no problem. We're thrilled to talk to you longer. Everybody, thanks for joining us, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you.